What's up, guys? Laura Whitmore here, founder of Strategic Test Prep. I scored a 1590 on the digital SAT, and I've been coaching students for over 18 years to get the best SAT scores possible. I've gotten a lot of requests to go through new question bank questions that were just released. And I'm really excited in this video today because I have hand selected the hardest new English questions that I've encountered since College Board came out with the new question sets. Before we get started, if you don't have access to the new question sets yet, we have all of them compiled for you because unfortunately College Board did not filter to the new questions in the question bank. So it's really hard for you when you go to the question bank to find these new questions, but don't worry, we've got you covered. If you subscribe to our email list, we will send you a link to our Google Drive so that you can access all of the questions that have been released in both English and math. There's about 300 new questions in the set. And I would say it's important that you guys practice these new questions if you're taking any upcoming tests at the end of 2025, because typically when College Board releases new questions, they end up showing up on the tests or there's very similar variations. So I'll link up here to our website. Head there, there will be a pop-up light box, put in your information, your name, your email, and then we will email you the link to get those questions. All right, guys, now before we get started, if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to this channel because I come out with free content every single week to help you master the SAT. It doesn't cost you anything to smash the subscribe button and notification bell below, so do something good for yourself today. Also, one other thing, comment below and let me know what you're struggling with in particular on the English modules. Is it time? Is it a certain type of question? This will give me better ideas for future videos to help you guys succeed on the test. All right, this first question is a really tricky graph question. And just so you know, I've put a link in the description below to all of the questions in this problem set. What I would recommend is download the problem set and try the questions first, then watch the rest of my video to see if you get the questions right and to understand maybe where you went wrong with my explanations. So this first problem is a doozy. A lot of graph questions are hard, and this is no exception. So what I would recommend for a graph question is to first go straight to the question itself and find out what they're asking for. And they want to support the researcher's conclusion. So usually the conclusion's in the last sentence, which is right here. And we see the word concluded. So definitely the last sentence is good to read. Now this one, when they talk about defending against microbial infection and all this stuff, as you read the last sentence, it feels like there's other details that you need. So my recommendation is if it feels like there's other details that you might need, go up to the first sentence and they'll give you that preliminary information. So the first sentence and the last sentence is where it's at, and that's what's important here. So our first sentence says, in tomato plants, herbivory induces defensive production of jasmonic acid. Okay, so maybe on my scrap paper, I might make a little note to keep track. So herbivory equals jasmonic, and then it looks like microbial infection induces defensive production of salicylic. So microbial ends up making salicylic. Haha, I'm probably not even pronouncing this right, but who cares, right? I'm just going to show you how to do the question. Okay. Plants also emit airborne chemicals to initiate the appropriate defense in nearby tomato plants. Okay, whatever that means. Let's go to the last sentence. The researchers concluded that white flies induce tomato plants to emit chemicals that cause other tomato plants to preferentially defend against microbial infection. All right, so that means when there's white flies, they're going to defend against microbial infection. Well, since microbial is salicylic, that means when there are white fly infested, it's going to cause more salicylic acid. So that is super important. That's our claim. That's what I'm looking for in the answer choices. I need to support that. So let me go through the answers, and these are really big, long answers. Honestly, you shouldn't spend any more than 2 to 2.5 minutes on a graph question. I would be concerned that reading all these is going to take me too much time. I noticed that all the answer choices have a whereas in them, so there is an element of a contrast here. So what I'd probably do, because I know how the SAT works, they design a lot of the answer choices to make them half right, all wrong. Meaning they'll make the first part of the answer choice sound really good, and then the second part will be wrong. To save time, I'm just going to read the second part after the whereas of each answer choice, because I'm anticipating that's where the wrong things are going to be. So A says, whereas when plants exposed to air from whitefly-infested plants were infested, they produced less jasmonic acid and more salicylic acid. That makes sense to me, because if it's whitefly infested, we've already determined that there will be more salicylic acid based on the conclusion, and so I'm going to hold A. Answer choice B says, whereas when plants exposed to air from whitefly-free plants were infested, whitefly-free, they produced about the same amount of jasmonic and salicylic acid. Well, first of all, whitefly-free isn't part of the claim, but I guess if you were going to reverse the claim, whitefly-free should have more jasmonic and less salicylic, or salicylic, whatever. The same amount sounds wrong to me, because that wouldn't be the case, so I'm going to get rid of B. Notice how I'm not even using the graph. Honestly, a lot of the times you don't need the graph to be able to answer the question. The question says describes data, and when they say describes data, a lot of the times you don't need the graph. When it says uses data, that's when you need the graph. So I'm still just going to keep going. We have whereas when this is answer choice C. When plants exposed to air from whitefly-infested plants were infested, they exclusively produce salicylic acid. Okay, I'm going to check the graph on that, because I don't know if that's the case. So the whitefly-infested is the dark one. But it looks like there's still jasmonic acid for whitefly infested. So it's not exclusive to salicylic, it's both. So the fact that it says exclusively, that's wrong. We're going to get rid of C. Let's go to D. Whereas when plants exposed to air from whitefly-free plants were infested, they produced more jasmonic acid and salicylic acid than did control plants. Well, I mean, if I want to go up and look at the graph for whitefly-free, that's the lighter one, and it looks like, it looks like the salicylic is very close to the control, where I don't know, it doesn't feel like it's going with the claim. So honestly, I probably shouldn't have looked at the graph, because whitefly-free is not the focus of the conclusion. The focus of the conclusion is when it's whitefly infested, then there's, more defense against microbial infections, which goes with salicylic acid. So that is true to the graph, but it's not true to the conclusion. So I'm going to get rid of D. I feel really confident picking A. All right, so that is how you work through a graph question. If that was helpful, give me a thumbs up, hit that like button below. Let's go to question 2. All right, now we're on to problem 2, which is another really tricky graph problem. These graph problems are what get students, especially students trying to score super high in English, like over 700. So you guys have to be really careful. Let's talk about how to approach this. First things first, you want to go to the question to see what it's asking for. Now this says what uses data. So chances are we're going to need the graph here, and we want to complete the student's conclusion. So the student's conclusions in the last sentence, it says, comparing the data for bananas with and without ethylene, the student concluded that. So Each answer choice, we're going to go through and we're going to check it according to the graph to see if it's right or not. So let's start with A. It says 20 degrees Celsius is the ideal temperature at which to store bananas to slow ripening time. Well, you have to be really careful with this graph because this is lower, so it looks like, yes, they slow ripening time, but it's measured in days, so always read your axes. That means it takes less days to ripen because the graph, the title is about ripening time, so it actually ripens faster at 20 degrees Celsius. So that's just wrong. That's an opposite. Okay, let's go to B. It says for those bananas that were not treated with ethylene. Okay, so no, we're looking at the no ethylene group. Let me erase my work from this last answer. The no ethylene group is the black one. It says differences in temperature were not associated with absolute differences in ripening time. Well, as you can see, when the temperature goes up by 2 degrees every time, the ones with no ethylene, the absolute, what is it called? The absolute differences in ripening time, it is associated with it because as the temperature goes up, what happens to the absolute ripening time is it goes down. So like, see how it goes from 11 to 9.5? That's a difference of 1.5, but if you take the absolute value of it, it changes by 1.5. Then it goes down again to 8.5. So it goes down another absolute value of 1. So that's not true to the graph because as the temperature changes, it does impact the absolute differences in ripening time. So B is out. Another thing I don't like about B is that it just feels almost like we're missing the comparison with the bananas with ethylene. So it almost feels like a within groups comparison where it's like comparing apples to apples and not a between groups comparison. We really need to compare it to the other group and see a difference between the ethylene and the non-ethylene. So there's just a lot going on with this. It's inaccurate to the graph. It doesn't feel like it's supporting the conclusion. I'm going to get rid of B. Answer choice C, it says, bananas treated with ethylene ripen faster at 14 degrees and 16 degrees than at 18 and 20. Well, now we're looking at the ethylene group, and honestly, I already know that that's false because at 14 and 16, it takes longer. It takes 8 days and 6 days to ripen, and then at 18 and 20, it's faster. So here's another opposite answer. Not to mention, it still kind of feels like a within groups comparison, and they're not really focused on comparing it to the no ethylene group, so I don't like that one either. At this point, if you've solidly eliminated 3 answers, you can just pick D and move on and flag it to come back to later. That's what I would do because I don't want to spend any more time on this question. However, for the sake of fully explaining this question, let's look at D and let's see why it's right. Okay, so it says comparing the data for bananas with and without ethylene, the ethylene was associated with a greater absolute change. Okay, now the way that it's worded, we are comparing ethylene to without ethylene. So when they talk about the greater absolute change, we're looking for the difference between the 2 bars. So as you can see, you know, it's 3 down, and then 3 down and 3 down, but then at 20, it's only 1.5 down. So the absolute change goes from 3 to just 1.5 at 20 degrees. So D is the right answer. The difference with the greater absolute change is that this one is comparing it to the without ethylene group, whereas in B, since it starts out saying for those bananas that were not treated with ethylene, they're just talking about those bananas, the absolute differences. So we're not comparing the 2 bars with each other. So it's the way that the sentence is structured and set up because of the modifier at the beginning of the sentence and the way D is worded, now we're doing a between groups comparison with ethylene and no ethylene, and that is true to the graph. So that compares the two things with each other. It's true to the graph. It has to be the right answer. All right, now moving on to problem 3. So let's look at some tricky grammar problems. So this one is the first time I've seen them test apostrophes this way. It says, for instance, from 1970 to 2020, blank, chorus to verse ratios trended similarly. Okay, now a lot of students want to pick D, rock and raps, but the problem is that makes rock and rap one genre, owning the chorus to verse ratio. And the thing is, ratios is plural, meaning rock is going to have one and rap is going to have one. So they both have ownership and they're both separate. So you want to make sure for this one you pick answer choice B. All right. Problem 4 is a tricky one because it's testing parallelism, but it's testing in a way they used to test it on the paper test. And then this concept went away for a while. So the sentence says, compared with that of a highly concentrated market, the key is it says that of. So we're not comparing with a highly concentrated market. That of means we're comparing to a characteristic, something about the highly concentrated market, not the market itself. So this is just a non-essential clause. We can get rid of that. And since this whole first part is a modifier, our next step is to find the subject, which should come right after. We can't compare a characteristic of a highly concentrated market to another market itself. So A is out. And then a less concentrated market, that's out. And, you know, the subject can't be when, so that's out. Plus, this is still talking about the market. The only one you can pick is one that says the HHI score, because the that of is the placeholder for the HHI score for a highly concentrated market. Now we're comparing it to the HHI score of a lower concentrated market. All right, problem 5 is another tricky apostrophes problem, so I threw this one in here as well. This is great because what you can do is you can just play majority rules. So when I look at the 4 answer choices, I see 3 that have a variables plural. So I'm going to get rid of A because it's a weird variables possessive. And then when I look at all of the objects, these 2 are different than the rest, and then these 2 are exactly the same. So I'm going to go with B. All right, the last and final problem in this set is a subject-verb agreement question. This one's sneaky. I actually had a high flyer I was working with the other day who got this wrong, so I figured it'd be good to throw in here just so you guys are aware of what to look for. So when you have 4 answer choices and they're verbs, what I want you to do is use the pronoun trick. So you're going to test with he and they to see what verbs are plural and what ones are singular, and you're going to pick the one that's different. So he animates, they have animated, they animate. You wouldn't say he animating or they animating, so that's a throwaway answer. So the answer is probably A. Now, if we go up into the sentence, we can actually validate that answer, because when I start to read it, the question of what, da, 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 question is the subject. This of is called a preposition. So this whole thing of what cross-cultural traits distinguish these distinct modes, that's a prepositional phrase. I'm going to get rid of all of that because all that's doing is describing more about the subject. Then we have between 2 commas, non-essential, a non-essential clause. And secondarily, what pressures led human, I'm going to cross all that off. That's all extra. So basically, we have the question animates neuropsychologist Daniela Sammer's 2024 study. Question is singular. Your verb needs to be singular. Try not to read too far into it. My student thought, oh, we have a question and then secondarily something else. So she thought there was two things and made it plural. But listen, the pronoun trick will work all of the time. So if you have more than one plural verb tense, it's probably not plural. Go with the singular one. All right, guys, that is it for this video. I hope these hard English questions have you thinking about strategies and how to approach even the toughest questions on the test. Go ahead and comment below and let me know what your favorite problem was on this problem set. If you want to learn more about the strategies and ways to tackle each type of question on the English modules of the SAT, we have an awesome English self-paced course taught by me. And they're all exclusive videos that aren't available on YouTube. Right now, I'm actually offering $50 off the course for all of you YouTube viewers out there if you put in the code 50OFF at checkout. So I will link up here to the course. You can go enroll in that. And until next time, happy prepping.